When it comes to video games, fighting bosses is a big part of the experience. From Dark Souls to Super Mario, you'll find that they're a recurring theme across multiple genres. MMORPG is no different. MMOs, bosses are usually enemies that require multiple people to take down due to being tuned for groups, and in most cases, are impossible to kill solo unless you drastically outlevel them. In Guild Wars 2, however, this is not the case. You can't outlevel enemies in Guild Wars 2 due to two reasons. One is that the level cap stops at 80 and has been at 80 since the launch of the game. And two, the game scales you down to the level of a map, so no matter if you're level 80 in a level 12 zone, your stats will be equal to the strongest the level 12 can possibly be. Guild Wars 2 categorizes its enemies in a tier system, where Champion, Legendary, and Epic are the three boss categories. Because of this, and the game's scaling, these bosses become a challenge at any level of play, as long as the boss itself has mechanics that are a threat to the player. Champions, the lowest tier of boss, are what players usually attempt to solo, since it is not uncommon to run into them in the open world. But why do players solo them, knowing that they are designed for groups? This is because Guild Wars 2's combat system has many ways for you to actively avoid damage to sustain yourself on every class in the game, so soloing these types of enemies becomes something more akin to a test of skill instead of something impossible due to design choices. Especially because this is one of the few tap target MMOs where you can avoid a boss's high damaging auto attacks. So that's why today, I want to showcase a few of the hardest of these champions, at least when it comes to the vanilla section of the game. By vanilla, I mean the things that were in the game when the game launched. This is not including things like Silver Waste or Dry Top. If you like this video, leave a like down below and subscribe and hit the bell to get notified when the next one comes out. Now without any further ado, this list isn't in any particular order, so sit back and relax as we cover 5 of the hardest champions to solo in Vanilla Guild Wars 2. First up, we have the Champion Risen Megalodon, located in Sparklife Fen. Sharks are dangerous, especially in Guild Wars 2, where they won't hesitate to swarm you from a distance. What makes it worse is that they love applying bleed to you, so while you're swimming away from the army of carnivores that are chasing you down, you're slowly dying to damage over time effects, making it difficult to get back to shore in a timely manner. Now take that concept and apply it to a massive undead shark that could eat you whole, and then some in a single bite. When this shark attacks you, it applies not only bleed, but poison as well, so you end up with 2 sources of damage over time on you, and one of them makes your healing skills 33% less effective. These sources of damage stack up quickly over the source of the fight, as nearly every single one of its attacks apply them, and also has an attack that applies weakness to you, which lowers the rate of which your dodge recovers, and causes 50% of your attacks to do 50% less damage. What makes this overgrown toothfish a real threat though, is its dash attack. A telegraphless move that deals massive damage to you per hit, but also knocks you back and applies the bleed for each packet of damage you take from it. All of this, combined with the fact that you're fighting underwater, which is a 3D space that has no terrain to take advantage of when it comes to pathing, makes fighting this monster a massive challenge. And you can't even cheese it from attacking it on land. Its acro mechanics only allow it to be in combat with you if you're on its turf, so you're at a big disadvantage at the very start. But with enough condition cleanse, health regeneration, and a good idea of when it usually uses its dash attack, you should be able to take it down eventually. Just make sure to not run into any of the other sharks in the area because they're there too, and they're hungry. Second on this list, we have the champion Krait Hypnoss in Mount Maelstrom. Krait are known for their viciousness, and this boss is no exception. Located high above the Mire Sea, top of the structure the Krait of the area called their home, this boss awaits adventurers, protecting a treasure chest. If you don't die trying to climb this labyrinth of uneven terrain and broken ship parts, you might just die to this boss, because they don't fight alone. During the duration of this fight, the Hypnoss summons different Krait allies to assist them, ranging from Krait that pull you, Krait that knock you back, Krait that explode, and Krait that apply bleeding to you every hit. You're going to be in a constant fight against upwards of 4 enemies at once, and any of them can be veteran rank, which deals more damage to you and has more HP. If you don't kill these enemies quickly, the boss summons more of them, which means more knockbacks, more explosions, and overall, pretty bad time. On top of all of that, the Krait has a backwards dash that leaves several AoEs of poison on the ground that stack poison on you if you remain in them, an attack that puts a large AoE on the ground that applies weakness, cripple, poison, and confusion to you, which means that your movement speed is reduced, your heals are less effective, you're taking damage over time, your dodges are recovering slower, your damage is lower, and to just pour more salt into the wound, your own attacks are causing you to take massive damage. And all of these just stack up more and more the longer you stand in the AoE. Especially the confusion, which stacks up in increments of 3 per pulse. This boss fight takes place on a pretty small platform, so you're really left with barely any room to move around as you'd like. But hey, if you do succeed in taking this one down, you get a chest of loot to open, so that's always an upside. In the third spot on this list, we have champion Drakin Cinderspire, located in the Iron Marches. Since the days of Guild Wars 1, the Flame Legion has been burning things as they please, and located in the very back of the Scorch Lands is this champion, found being assaulted by the Scorch Warband. This boss is the most traditional found on this list so far, as he comes with phases. In the first phase, he uses powerful melee attacks to cleave you down, applying burning with each hit, crippling on the third hit of his attack chain, and a flurry attack that does massive damage and applies bleeding and immobilization to you. After depleting his health bar to 0, he enters a transition phase where he becomes invulnerable and summons adds for you to kill. After killing a certain amount of them, he enters his second phase, where he changes his swords out for an axe, where he gains the skill Eviscerate, something warriors are very familiar with, as it's one of their most powerful abilities on the axe weapon set. He also gains the ability to throw his axe, and to channel a point-blank AoE that damages you if you're next to him, and causes him to throw projectiles at anyone who hit him with one first. After once again reducing his HP to 0, he enters another transition phase, which is just like the first, and after completing that, he reaches his final combat phase. Tosses away his weapons and fights you with his fists and fire. He conjures wells underneath your feet that explode and launch you away, with a cone of highly damaging fire at you, attacks with a burst of flame magic at melee range, and charges you with a powerful punch that does a massive amount of damage and launches you away. Each stage of this fight is dangerous in its own way, but luckily the arena that you fight him in is big enough for you to kite around with the ranged weapon. So remember that champions are immune to crowd control effects in the traditional sense. Throwing out a single stone will not stop him from advancing towards you, and he will brush off your cripples and chills like they're nothing. But if you keep throwing enough at him, they will break his break bar and allow you to somewhat gain some ground back, and if worse comes to worse, you can just retreat inside of the blue bubble located on the side of the arena. It makes you immune to damage, but disables your weapon skills, so you can just watch him from its safety while you rethink your plan of attack, if you can even get there to begin with. Luckily, every time you phase him, that becomes the phase he gets stuck in until he dies, so if you manage to phase him at all, that's progress you would just have in case of you're defeated, and is still one of the more mechanically cool champions in the base game. For number 4 on this list, we have the champion Risen Drake Broodmother. Drakes are one of the most common enemy types you will find in the game, but none of them come even close in strength to this one. You can find this champion in the Stretch Devastation towards the southeast area of the map, usually hanging out just off the shoreline. From a distance, this champion looks like any other Risen Drake. When you get closer to it, the event text pops up, and by then, your choice is to either stand and fight or to run away. The Drake doesn't seem to be very intimidating at first glance, but what earned its spot on this list is 2 factors. It has a nearly telegraphless dash attack like the shark from earlier, which deals a ton of damage to you and knocks you back while also applying semi-long lasting weakness debuff to you. And as it dashes, it lays eggs that will hatch into smaller Risen Drakes, which can quickly swarm you if you don't kill the eggs fast enough. These eggs are all positioned inside of overlapping AoE fields that will damage you if you stand in them, and hatch pretty quickly. If you don't get up fast enough after being CC'd, the eggs should easily hatch and add another source of damage you have to deal with. Each time it uses this dash, it spawns more and more of these hatchlings, so if you aren't cleaving them down while you're fighting it, the fight becomes increasingly more difficult to deal with. Killing the eggs isn't that easy of a task itself either. Every time one is destroyed, it explodes and applies weakness and poison to you, which makes it harder to survive and cleave down the rest of the eggs, and other eggs. And on top of it all, the Drake has a breath attack that applies a unique non-removable debuff to you called Iker, which lowers your movement speed by 33% and lasts for 5 seconds. All of these mechanics make fighting this boss a fight from behind the entire time. You might be decreasing the boss's health bar over time, sure, but the longer you take to kill it, the harder it will get. And if you're not careful, you might find yourself respawning at the nearest waypoint before you know it. Last but not least, we have the Champion Risen King, the entire original reason that I decided to make this video in the first place. I remember a long time ago, when I was freshly exploring the depths of Ore, I stumbled upon his area and was immediately one-shotted. It was an experience that I still remember to this day and still struggle to solo him even now. The footage you just saw was not of my first ever fight against his champion, nor was it my first attempt to get footage of this boss for the video. I was caught completely off guard by its attack, as I hadn't fought the boss in over a year, so I took my entire health bar and damage in the span of less than a second. Needless to say, I was more alert after that. This encounter takes place within the Azabe Kabar royal tombs within the Cursed Shore, and while this boss does not have much in the way of mechanics, the attacks it uses are very dangerous. First, put up a shield onto himself that will apply might every time he is struck up to 25 times, destroy your projectiles, and knock you back if you're in melee range. After channeling this ability, he blasts the area around him for a lot of damage. Outside of the damaging factor of this mechanic, the fact that he can potentially get 25 might is a big threat in itself. When it comes to player characters, you start off with the 1000 power at base at level 80. This is the stat that determines how much base damage we deal. If we add on another 1000 power to that, we essentially double our damage. 25 stacks of might increases power by 750, which essentially makes it a 75% base damage increase for players. While the amount of power this boss has at base is unknown, 750 power is not anything to laugh at. The second of this boss's mechanics is called Penetrating Beam, which is a channeled laser attack that does damage to you as long as the beam is connected to you and it's not obstructed by line of sight. This beam also applies vulnerability to you up to 20 times if you do not avoid it in its entirety, and the attack lasts around 6 seconds, so you can imagine that the vulnerability stacks up on you pretty quickly. Finally, there is its Eye Super Spin attack, which causes the boss to spin around in a circle for a brief second, flinging projectiles at you. If you're the only one fighting the boss, then these projectiles will all be aimed at you. And as you saw at the beginning of this segment, he hit me for 19.5k damage with this attack, and he didn't even have any damage modifiers at the time. I'm playing Necromancer in this clip. It has the highest base HP pool out of all the light armor classes. In full extended armor, my HP is at 19.2k at base, and this is an attack he can pretty much spam, as it seems to have quite a low cooldown. Use it to put me into down state, then use it again a few seconds later to kill me in down state. You're gonna need to take good advantage of line of sight and to bring projectile denial like reflex or projectile destruction fields. You also need a way to sustain yourself quickly, since every single one of his attacks hurt a lot. But if you do manage to conquer this insane enemy, there's a hero point in the room that you can channel if you're still trying to complete the Curse Shore for map completion, or if you're trying to convert some quartz crystals into a charge crystal. But they're probably less deadly hero points to go for in that case. With that all said and done, that's the end of the video. I hope you enjoyed, and I would love to hear about any other champions that you would consider to be hard in vanilla zones with Guild Wars 2. It would be really helpful when I get around to making a part 2 of this list. Other than that, I hope you had a wonderful week. See you next time.